Mueller dropping a major bomb on Trump in a new court filing, and we've got a few of them here tonight. In a new filing, Mueller says President Trump's former attorney Michael Cohen has, quote, gone to significant lengths to assist the special counsel's investigation. Mueller goes on to say Cohen helped in multiple, quote, significant respects. OK, so multiple significant respects. And in this filing, we learned that there are multiple Russia-related issues that are core to the investigation. So let me read to you Mueller's words here to that effect. This is from page 6 of the 7-page filing. Cohen provided the SCO, that's the special counsel's office, with useful information concerning certain discrete Russia-related matters core to its investigation that he obtained by virtue of his regular contact with company executives during the campaign. Matters, plural, core to the investigation. Also, the time frame, something very, very important here, could be changing tonight. Mueller saying Cohen's helped, including discussing contacts with people connected to the White House as recently as this year. Just be clear, that's 2018. So again, I go back here to page 6 and Mueller's words. Quote, Cohen provided relevant and useful information concerning his contacts with persons connected to the White House during the 2017-2018 time period. And also in this filing, specific contacts with a Russian, it appears that we did not know about. You're going to hear a whole lot more about that in just a moment. But it comes as the Southern District of New York also filed in court today about Michael Cohen, recommending a substantial prison sentence for Trump's former personal lawyer. Even as prosecutors said that the president of the United States himself, basically, it could have, we're going to talk about exactly what this means, committed a felony by violating campaign finance law with that Stormy Daniels payment. The president seemed well aware today that big things were about to drop, going on a Twitter tirade today against Mueller. Witch hunt, Robert Mueller's big-time conflicts of interest, 5-tweet-long rant. Look at it on your screen there, with multiple unfounded and some inaccurate, just on the facts of it, accusations against Mueller. Let's begin here with Evan Perez out front in Washington. Evan, we're here just talking about Cohen. Of course, we've got all these Manafort filings as well. I want to ask you, though, here, Mueller talking in this 7-page document about these significant areas of cooperation by Cohen. What's most important to you?
Well, they talk about, Aaron, these 4 areas that Michael Cohen was very helpful with the special counsel. And one of them has to do with his contacts with Russians about the so-called Moscow project, the project to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. And there were others connecting with Russians, trying to make contact. There were other Russians trying to make contact with the campaign. And in particular, they talk a little bit about a trusted person, a Russian national, who was suggesting a political synergy campaign. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that. The second thing that they talk about, that the special counsel says, is that there's information related to Russian-related matters, obviously, that were core to this investigation. As you said, you were pointing to the fact that these were things that he learned from interacting with the Trump organization. That's a big deal as this investigation goes forward. And then, of course, the special counsel points out that Michael Cohen describes people he was talking to close to the White House through 2018. That is this year. Again, when the president talks about this is an investigation that is looking way, way back, what the special counsel is saying is that they're looking at information that came in this year. And then there's finally how he was coordinating with people close to the president on some of his false statements. Now, we've seen that in some of these court filings, but it's very important for us to keep in mind that Mueller wants to know how the lies came about and whether or not the lies were essentially an effort to obstruct this investigation. But back to the Russian, we don't know a lot about this person, but this person apparently is someone who is close to the Kremlin, and we know that Michael Cohen had been working on this Moscow project. This appears to be a separate project, Aaron.
And we understand, from looking at this, Evan, to your point, it would seem significant that we are now entering a new Russian into this who was close to Putin.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's what's interesting about this, is that we've seen some of the other characters that Michael Cohen was talking to. We know that he had been in touch with Peskov, Dmitry Peskov, who is the spokesman, someone's very close to Vladimir Putin. We know he was also working through Sater, somebody who a Russian national, somebody who has U.S. citizenship, who was trying to be an interlocutor with the Russians. This appears to be a totally different character that we have not seen before, and it tells us that the special counsel has more information about this person, and maybe we'll see this in more information that comes forward in this investigation.
All right, thank you very much, Evan. We're going to talk much more about this person. Talking about multiple times about a meeting between Putin and Trump. We'll get to those details in a moment. I want to go through the Southern District of New York's filing on Cohen, because that was also hugely significant. Especially when we talk about whether the president of the United States committed a felony by violating campaign finance law by the Stormy Daniels payment. MJ Lee has been covering and going through this filing. And MJ, we hear the special counsel say Michael Cohen's been very cooperative, but in the Southern District, not the same point of view at all.
That's absolutely right. If you just look at this SDNY filing, it is bad news for Michael Cohen, no question about it. It is actually asking the court to give Michael Cohen a substantial term of imprisonment, only a modest amount of leniency from the few years that he could get. Of course, this is bad news for Michael Cohen, whose lawyers have actually been asking for no jail time for him when he is sentenced next week. This filing from SDNY lays out how he evaded taxes, how he lied to banks, and also how he illegally tried to affect the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. This last point, of course, is the most relevant for President Trump. These are the payments that we have been talking about all year to Karen McDougal and to Stormy Daniels, two women who alleged to have had affairs with Donald Trump. Not only, this is really interesting, not only does the filing just lay out how Michael Cohen tried to affect the outcome of the election by coordinating these hush payments to these two women, it also goes to some lengths to say how Michael Cohen was effectively hurting the democratic process, how he was deceiving the American people and American voters, and how he orchestrated secret and illegal payments to silence two women who otherwise probably would have gone public with their stories about Donald Trump. And even though, Aaron, the filing doesn't actually come out and say that Michael Cohen was delusional or perhaps in denial, the suggestion is at least there. It says that he has a rose-colored view of the seriousness of his crimes and that he is asking for extraordinary leniency, even though the crimes that he committed are so serious. And I just want to quickly read a key passage from this SDNY filing that sums up the seriousness of all of this. It says, after cheating the IRS for years, lying to banks and to Congress, and seeking to criminally influence the presidential election, Cohen's decision to plead guilty rather than seek a pardon from his manifold crimes does not make him a hero. Now, that last piece, I'm betting, is going to be a bit of a gut punch for Michael Cohen because, again, his strategy has been recently to present himself as a new man who wants to deliver the truth to investigators and to cooperate and to get no jail time. That is their goal. Clearly, Aaron, SDNY does not agree.
Clearly not. MJ Lee, thank you very much, as they are requesting, 3.5 years of prison time for Michael Cohen.
We're beginning with breaking news. We are learning the first details about what President Trump told special counsel Robert Mueller's team in response to those written questions he received. A source reveals what the president said about two key issues that are part of Mueller's Russia investigation. Joining me now, we have CNN reporter Kara Scannell, former federal prosecutor and CNN legal analyst Shan Wu, crime and justice reporter Shimon Prokupecz, and our chief political correspondent Dana Bash. Tell us about this new reporting.
Well, Brianna, as you mentioned, we are getting the first insight into how the president responded to Robert Mueller's written questions, which until now has been a big unknown. So sources familiar with this matter tell CNN two things. Number one, the president told the special counsel that Roger Stone did not tell him about WikiLeaks. And number two, that the president was also not told about the 2016 Trump Tower meeting between his son, campaign officials, and a Russian lawyer who, of course, promised dirt on Hillary Clinton. Now, the president's answers were described to us without providing any direct quotes and said that the president made clear he was answering to the best of his recollection. But, Brianna, these 2 points here, WikiLeaks and the Trump Tower meeting, they are really key, as far as we know, to Robert Mueller's central mission when he started this investigation, which is, was there any collusion between Team Trump and the Russians?
And if so, how high up does it go as well?
Yeah.
How is this different, what we know he's said here, compared to what he's said publicly?
So we're told, Brianna, that what the president said in these written answers is similar, matches actually what he has said in public. But of course, there's a big difference. These written answers would be subject to criminal charges if false. That's why it is our understanding that the president made clear his answers were the best of his recollection, which is standard for lawyers as a way to shield their client, to make sure that they're not in any legal trouble if their answers are challenged.
And especially, Shimon, because some time has passed since we know some time has passed, of course, since the Donald Jr. Trump Tower meeting with a number of campaign officials, including Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, with the Russians. There was a blocked call that Donald Jr. Was talking to someone who had a blocked number after the meeting. He has said repeatedly that that was not his father. The president here is saying, to the best of my recollection, where are we on the blocked call and how significant that could be when we know what Dan is reporting here?
And that is still a very significant thing that we don't have answered. We don't yet know who that blocked call was from. Look, the special counsel will know who that blocked call was from because we know they've subpoenaed phone records, emails, all that information they now have. Whether or not they get to follow up with the president, I think that's the key point here also, that do they now have enough to follow up to the president if this does exist, if there are phone calls, if there is information that people were communicating, whether it's WikiLeaks, whether it's the Trump Tower meeting, whether they were communicating in real time information to the president. Does this now, if this exists, is there enough information for them to follow up with the president about?
Shan, you're a former federal prosecutor. When you hear that these are the president's answers to these written questions from the special counsel, what's your reaction?
My reaction is I would really want to follow up. That phone call has been just a nagging red flag to me for a long time because it's such an easy answer. And I think it's significant he's talking about his recollection there because he's definitely leaving himself a little bit of fudge room.
So that is significant to you. That's not just lawyer speak, to the best of my knowledge. That's not just providing cover. Do you think he should be able to recollect if he did indeed talk to his son?
I think so. I mean, it is lawyer coaching. I mean, we tell people if you don't remember something, say that you don't remember it. Given these circumstances, I don't really believe that he wouldn't remember such a thing. And I always like my clients just to say, no, I don't think that happened.
Well, but that's not what he says, Kara.
No, and it also puts potentially his son in some legal jeopardy if his answer were to go the other way, because Don Jr. has testified before at least 3 congressional committees where he has said under oath that he did not tell his father about the email, about the meeting in advance of it. So if Trump answered the opposite way, that would also put his son in some trouble, too.
And what about the WikiLeaks part of this, Shan? What's the significance there for you?
Well, the WikiLeaks part of it, there seems to be so much sort of tension building on that front. And I think that really is what Mueller's interested in, to really put the campaign in touch with the Russians. I mean, that's kind of the missing link there, is if you can connect those dots for it. And so I think that's what the significance is.
I think what's interesting is what we learned from the entire Corsi situation yesterday, is that there is information that the special counsel believes that they have, that Roger Stone was communicating with senior members of the Trump campaign about WikiLeaks. These documents that Corsi released to everyone doesn't say who that senior member is. Mm-hmm. And it's clear that the special counsel believes this. Whether or not they actually have solid information about this, or that they can present at a court of law and use in a criminal case, is a whole other thing. But at least we can tell, and when you read these documents that Corsi released, there is information. Something exists within the special counsel's office that says Roger Stone was communicating about WikiLeaks, about other stuff, with senior members of the Trump campaign.
And that's such an important point, Shimon, because it's connected to what we're reporting about the president's testimony. Because the context of this, of course, is that you talk to people even real time in 2016, it's like, oh yeah, Roger Stone was kind of kicked to the curb, but he still talks to the president all the time. So separate from this whole question of whether he talked to other members of the Trump campaign, Roger Stone, has been whether he had any side conversation with the president of the United States. And if the president has said, effectively under pain of criminal charges, no, with the caveat, as far as I recollect, that's important.
And the reason, Kara, that the special counsel is so interested in the WikiLeaks connection is because WikiLeaks dumped a bunch of hacked emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta. And then you had some timing that seemed more than coincidental between then candidate Trump talking about WikiLeaks and Roger Stone tweeting, I believe, about WikiLeaks. How does that all fit together, and what does special counsel do if he can't actually connect the dots here?
Well, there are a lot of tweets that were, premonitions about John Podesta's time in the barrel coming up. And then you see there are these efforts behind the scenes to try to figure out information, particularly Corsi saying, telling Sarah Murray that, he created this document, to explain this email after the fact, because Roger Stone, kind of went out there saying that, this is based on Corsi's research, and then Corsi says the tweet came before the research. So, that shows that there's a bit of a cover-up, but not necessarily illegal, but one that they're having, at least among themselves, to get their story straight about the timing here. And there's still a lot of missing links here. I mean, even if we see that Roger Stone might be saying to Corsi, well, come on, find out some information, we don't see the connection from Corsi to WikiLeaks yet. And so there are still some gaps in the information that is public, but that doesn't mean that Robert Mueller hasn't filled in those gaps either.
But they clearly think there could be a link, right, Shimon? Because Corsi his line is, well, this was just a prediction I had that WikiLeaks was going to do this. And I did. I shared my prediction with Roger Stone. He says, Roger Stone's like, no, he didn't tell me about that. So they're getting their stories kind of mixed up.
They clearly don't believe what Corsi is saying, because
the special counsel does not. Yeah.
Because when he came up with this story, he tells this story in one of the first interviews he did this week. He tells this story about how he's connecting the dots and he's doing forensic work, and it just kind of comes to him, and that's how he knew this. And he tells a story about how the special prosecutor, one of the special prosecutors, is like, that just does not believe him. So they don't believe him. That's why they're having issues with it. And they may have other information that we just don't know about. The other thing that's important, I think, what Dana here is reporting, is that you would hope that, given how much trouble people have gone into when they appear before the special counsel and that they lie, you would hope that the president is not dumb enough to do this. You would hope that his lawyers are not dumb enough to go ahead and lie. And you would hope that they have done some work so that it doesn't set him up in what he's been calling a perjury trap. He has, by saying he doesn't recall, obviously that protects him in some light. But imagine if the special counsel comes out and has information in this report that refutes this entire story. That's going to be a pretty big deal.
Shan?
Yeah, I mean, to Kara's point, I think it's fascinating that he's trying to couch his memory that way, because if he really wants to stand up for his son there, he just needs to be completely confirming, absolutely, that didn't happen.
And I just want to be clear that the answers that the president gave to Robert Mueller were described to us. So we don't have and so the description from our sources was, the gist was, as far, to the best of my recollection.
Sure.
We don't have the exact wording.
Yep.
Tonight, we now know why President Trump has been so anxious over the last week when it comes to Robert Mueller, even going so far as, to one point, tweeting that his attorney general should end the Russia investigation. According to sources close to the White House, the president is scared for his son, Don Jr. He's scared about what Mueller may have on him. The president has been hosting a rally in Ohio tonight, and that's where we find CNN White House correspondent Boris Sanchez. Boris, has the president even mentioned Mueller at this rally, and why is he so concerned about his son now?
Hey there, Anna. No mention of the special counsel Robert Mueller or of Russia. The president not repeating that line we hear from him so often, no collusion. Still, the speech is going on, so he may go in that direction as I'm talking to you. But multiple sources close to the White House indicate that President Trump is worried that the Russia probe may get closer and closer to his family members, namely his son, Donald Trump Jr., and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, both of whom were in that June 2016 meeting in Trump Tower. Of course, Trump Jr. helped orchestrate that meeting with Russians that were promising dirt on Hillary Clinton. This all comes to a head as we're seeing much more expressive attacks from the president against the special counsel on Twitter. Just this week, he demanded that his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, end the Russia investigation, despite the fact that Sessions recused himself from that. Sources close to the White House say that as the president has seen the coverage of the special counsel's investigation, he's become more agitated, and that has led to these attacks. We should point out the president has denied having any knowledge of that meeting at Trump Tower, though sources close to Michael Cohen, his former attorney, say that the president president not only knew of that meeting, but also approved it. Now, the White House has not returned our request for comment on this story. They actually referred us to the White House legal team. They have declined to comment. Anna?
All right, Boris Sanchez, keep us posted on those comments he's making tonight at the rally. In the meantime, let's discuss with CNN legal analyst Paul Callan, CNN political contributor and former mayor of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter, and CNN political commentator and former Trump advisor, Steve Cortez. Paul, I'm reminded of the column you wrote last week about Don Jr. possibly being in trouble and how he could prove to be President Trump's Achilles heel.
Yes, I said that he was the Achilles heel in this case because if Don Jr. testified before Congress under oath, or even if he gave statements to congressional investigators, lying about whether the president knew about the Trump Tower meeting with the Russians, that would be perjury. And that could subject him to a possible jail sentence if convicted on that charge. So that's a very, very dangerous thing if that happens to be true.
And if that happens to be true, you went so far as to say that Robert Mueller may be able to try to work some kind of a deal with the president.
Well, yes. I mean, this is somewhat speculative, obviously. But if the president was of a mind that a lot of his relatives were going to get arrested, I mean, you know, it could be Don Jr., Jared Kushner could have a problem. He was at the Trump Tower meeting as well. It might put pressure on the president, much as pressure was on Richard Nixon to resign the presidency. So this kind of prosecutorial aggressive stance against the president can sometimes terminate in a resignation.
And that obviously would be huge, and that's a few steps down the road. But Steve, I know you were an advisor to Trump during the campaign. Several people have said they don't see Trump Jr. not running to his dad and telling him about that Trump Tower meeting. Do you have concerns?
You know, I really don't. I mean, first of all, the president has been emphatic on this. Don Jr. has not just been emphatic, but as Paul mentioned, has been under oath. So I think they've taken this very seriously in their denials. And what do we have on the other side? You know, what spurs this hypothetical? It's just the word of Michael Cohen. And Michael Cohen, I think, quite frankly, has besmirched his own reputation by really acting reprehensibly, by taping his own client, something which is at least unethical and perhaps could even lead to disbarment, secretly taping his own client, secretly taping other people, including colleagues of ours at CNN. So I don't think his word matters much, you know, in this regard. And as far as the
but it's not just Michael Cohen who has hinted that Trump has not been totally forthcoming, or that Don Jr. hasn't been entirely truthful either, because we've heard from Anthony Scaramucci, we've heard from Steve Bannon, who've also hinted at the fact they believe Trump probably knew at least very shortly after that meeting, not a year later when the New York Times initially broke the story.
I have to say this. It's not implausible to me, as somebody who was deeply involved in the campaign, that in June of 2016, when we were in the throes of trying to make sure that we secured the nomination, I mean, we had already won the primaries, but there was a lot of talk that there was going to be a convention fight against Donald Trump, that effectively the Republican establishment was going to try to steal the election away from Trump. That is all we were focused on. And the pace of the Trump campaign the entire time was nothing short of just frenetic. So the idea that they would pass on telling the president, the then candidate, about a very quick, meaningless 20-minute meeting where they got no valuable information, that actually makes sense to me.
Michael, Trump is a father. Is it odd for him to be concerned about his kids? I mean, just because you're a politician doesn't mean you stop caring about your kids, right?
Of course he cares about his kids. And Steve's explanation is just, it literally is laughable. Apparently, they weren't all focused on securing the nomination because the president's son, his son-in-law, and one of his top advisors, Steve Bannon, went to a meeting with Russians, and they knew that they were going to that meeting, and it is
Steve Bannon did not.
Any I'm sorry?
Steve Bannon was not there. That's not true.
Bannon was not at the meeting, but Jared Kushner was,
Bannon was not.
as well as
he certainly knew about it.
The
The first two were there. And Paul Manafort, I'm sorry.
That's right.
You're on that one, you're right. Paul Manafort, who is now under investigation. So it is completely implausible that he did not tell his father, in my mind at least, before the meeting and certainly after the meeting, that this was taking place. This is the same young man who talked about money pouring in from Russia back in 2008. This is also the same person who conspired with his father to issue a wrong statement, factually incorrect statement, on Air Force One about the same meeting. So, yeah, it seems like he's got some problems.
And they have admitted that he did, in fact, dictate that initial misleading statement. But, Paul, earlier this week, the president was tweeting that Attorney General Jeff Sessions should end the Mueller probe. Now, the White House says he was just offering an opinion. It wasn't actually a directive. But now that we know he may have been worried about his son, does that tweet amount to obstruction of justice?
I think it's something, obviously, that Mueller will be looking at as a potential obstruction, not an obstruction in and of itself, but as part of a whole package of actions that the president has taken to try to impede the Mueller investigation. And I think now we know, knowing what we know now about Don Jr.'s actions and the president worrying about this, we start to understand why the president has been acting so bizarrely during the last week. You know, there was a tweet storm that's kind of almost unprecedented from him during the past few days, all about the Mueller probe and threatening to fire Mueller, while his own attorneys are out saying, well, we're negotiating the president possibly giving a statement to Mueller. So he seems to be on a totally different track from his attorneys and very worried, and it feels like he's worried about a family member.
I mean, to that point, we look at how much he's starting to tweet, how he's attacking Mueller himself. The Washington Post saying he's tweeted the phrase witch hunt a combined 46 times in June and July. That was up from 29 times in April and May. And more, of course, he's calling out Mueller by name. Steve, if the president's son is in trouble with Mueller, how far do you think he would go to protect him?
Look, again, I don't want to engage in these hypotheticals. To my knowledge, Don Jr. hasn't done anything illegal. I think it was silly, by the way, for him to take that meeting. That was a mistake. Does it rise to the level of criminality? It sure doesn't seem that way to me, but I'm not a criminal defense attorney, so we'll see. I think, though, regarding the president, he clearly has been ratcheting up the rhetoric and the pace of his arguments against what's going on with the Russian probe. And I think the reason he has, though, isn't that he believes his son is in trouble. I believe the real reason is this probe, because they were able to come up with nothing connecting Trump himself, not other people, Donald Trump, to Russia. Instead, where the Mueller probe is headed, at least according to New York Times, according to some FBI sources, it's headed toward making a case for obstruction largely from public sources, from speeches and from tweets that the president put out. Now, I think that has the president justifiably incredibly angry if we are going to try to criminalize the public political speech of a president of the United States. That tells me that this is only about creating a narrative to impeach the president. It's not actually about justice. It's not about criminal law.
But why do you say that when you look at what Mueller has done? And in fact, we've been covering the Mueller investigation, and he has brought forward charges against 30 individuals and or entities. We have multiple people who've pleaded guilty. There are multiple indictments involving people who were part of his campaign, including the trial of Paul Manafort. Right now, he was the campaign chairman at one point.
Right. Anna, look, you make a good point there, but the vast majority of those indictments are against non-Americans, first of all. And within the Americans, the vast majority of the charges have nothing at all to do with the Trump campaign. They're things that Paul Manafort did 10, 12 years ago before he had any relationship to Trump, before Trump was a politician. So, yes, there have been a lot of indictments, a lot of charges made, but nothing still that's remotely connected to the president doing something improper with any foreign people.
And Mayor Nutter, I know you have some thoughts on this.
Right. Well, first of all, the Americans that have been charged are pretty important and significant people. The second thing is, Steve, you can try to spin it as much as you want like a top. The Mueller probe is nowhere near over at the moment. You cannot say that nothing has been proved against the president because nothing has been said or charges brought forward with regard to the president. So, I mean, you're running around in a no-person zone with that kind of information. Obviously, the president is clearly becoming unhinged. His head is about to explode. The closer and closer this probe comes, he knows that Manafort is in trouble. He knows Flynn is already in trouble. He knows that Michael Cohen is in trouble, and the many other investigations that are going on. This is all crashing in on him, and he flips out when he has a little extra time on the weekends, attacking. I mean, unfortunately, it's become the norm that he goes on these tweet storms over the course of the weekend when God only knows what he's doing, because he's doing pretty much the same thing during the course of the week. It does make you wonder, actually, what does he do other than tweet and go to rallies? How much work is actually getting done? And he's got a lot of probes around him. And, when they're at your kids, that will